Good morning, Cynthia.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Leviim Gallery.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here and schlepping in all the way from Ohio.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. I think the story is great, just the fact how you ended up in our gallery. So tell us how you discovered us and how you ended up here doing the solo show.
My daughter, Emma Kaufman Rose, she also has my name, like my middle and last name that sounds like it's in reverse, and she spends a lot of time on Instagram and social media. And she saw you and said, Mom, I was selling some Jewish art in Cleveland, and she said, Mom, you really need to connect with somebody in New York, and there's this Jewish gallery in New York, and you should connect. So I emailed you some photographs, and I got a positive response from you. And so it was basically through my daughter, who's my social media greatest saleswoman I have. And it sort of took off from there.
Because many, we get artists inquiring all the time, almost every day, show your art, how do we sell our art? And one thing that's what you could say you could learn from her is that even though some artists say, oh, we don't want to sell it, so we're starting artists, they say, okay, let's do a deal. And they're like, well, I don't know about the price. We want $1 million for each piece before you ever hit a gallery in your life or everyone heard of you. The fact that Cynthia just sent the art, said, oh, we'll do consignment, let's see what happens, and really push the initiative, I must say, because many artists will be watching this interview, the fact that once the gallery shows interest, it's really helpful just to do whatever it takes to get in, because that will really help launch your career. Especially our gallery has a lot of recognition in the Jewish art world. And anyway, so I just wanted to plug, just to let people know, especially artists watching this after, how to get into galleries, really working with the galleries in a way that it's the least risk as possible for a gallery, especially in New York, where square footage is very limited, everything's very expensive, but you get the foot traffic and the visibility that really helps artists a lot. So what was the first time you made a painting? What was that? How old were you? Where were you?
The first time I made a painting, probably before I could talk, my father was showing me postcards. My father, Yoji, and my mother, Ingeborg, were showing me art postcards because they are art enthusiasts and collect antique art. And they were showing me postcards and collecting art postcards. And some of my first words were artist names. And such as Botticelli. Before I could even talk, I was saying Botticelli instead of Botticelli. So they saw right away that I was into visuals and supplied me with materials and clay, and away I went from preschool. So there was nothing else I ever really was able to excel at. I liked other things, English literature, theater, basically all the creative type of things, but the art was always pulling me back.
And what's your inspiration to make the art, especially the series here you made of Shir Shir, correct?
Yeah.
I know that you have a much more modern style than when you initially started. And how did that happen?
Yeah, I started out wanting to learn realism and classical proportion and such, and I think it's important to do so, to learn composition and classical proportion. And then what happens with an artist, probably with just modern art, is one gets sort of bored with doing realism and one wants to start taking off from there and start expressing. And this, what I progressively came into, was abstract expressionism, and that's what these are. And so I kind of have two bodies of work, or lines of work. I started doing just pure abstract expressionism with color and form and texture, and wanting to do pieces that lifted up someone's spirit and soul. And I was doing skies, and I'm still doing the sky and the clouds and things that happen in the sky. So trying to make canvases that feel bigger than they are, sort of like windows from wherever you are that take you a step away and are like an escape. And I also have much religious interest in my life, much interest in the in the Bible, and it's been a great path for me with Judaism. My parents, wow, I'm starting, I don't know how far to go back, but my parents are Holocaust survivors, and I started reading, they weren't necessarily religious, but always very culturally Jewish. I started to read on my own, and the more I read, the more I liked it, and the more I read, the more engaging and beautiful I found the verses, and the more influential they were in my life. And then I started to put verses into small canvases, and then I kept doing the abstract canvases, and I'll bring up my father again. He said, "Why don't you put the two together?" So Yoji, thank you for your words of inspiration. And at first I thought it wouldn't work, because I thought it would look sort of arbitrary to just put verses in abstract, because I thought it would feel like a graphic design poster, but they started to go together. There's also something behind, did you want to ask a question before I continue? There's also something behind how the verses are displayed in the work, or how they're placed in the work. There's sort of many layers going on. And I started to realize that this is a visual expression of saying that no matter what happens to the Jewish people and to the Judaism, and how through history there's been attempts to wipe out Judaism, wipe out the Jewish people, and it cannot be done. And these are sort of, the verses come powerfully through many layers and express that in a way for me.
But what's very interesting, what you said is, what I see is with your words, you're making the seemingly old messages very relevant and applicable to today. You know, when you have a huge book of a Bible, there's a million things, you can get very lost. But when you highlight one specific verse, the meaning is a lot deeper and more meaningful. And the way with your colors make it very contemporary and make it really wonderful. How do you decide the verses? I mean, there's a million verses in the Bible. What's your procedure or process when you say this verse or this color or anything like that?
I have to thankfully acknowledge all the support I've had from family. There's certain verses that touch me personally. And the Shir HaShirim, the love song, just has continued to touch me because of the love of God for his people. And there's emotion, there's poetry, there's beauty. There's so much in that book. It's really an artist's book. And
we're looking forward to a great show later today. More on a personal note to artists. Most artists that come to our gallery, very often they don't have a background. When you sent me your CV, your resume of all the places you've shown, and group shows, and this show, that show, it obviously bring a lot of validation to your work. What's your suggestion to new young artists who are coming out? Now, if I may say, many artists that come to us, I don't know if their work qualifies to be in a gallery setting, but who knows? You know, today, people have different things. But once the artist gets interest from a gallery, which I would say says a lot, what's the best way, or forget gallery, what's the best way for an artist, you've clearly been doing this for a very long time, to get exposure, representation? What would you suggest an artist steps to take to break out, or whatever you want to say, whatever the word is?
Thankfully, there's the social media. As far as getting into a gallery, I really appreciate how much work goes behind the scenes in a gallery, and how much time, how much footwork goes behind the scenes of people that run galleries. So I would say just be happy that someone even answers your letter, and then be even happier if they say, well, let's take a look at it. And if you have to start by selling for very little, then it's okay, because you get exposure that way. And if the work is good, then things take off from there. But I think that the gallery owner and the artist are sort of a partnership. So I hope that answers the question.
All right. Well, what would you tell let's say galleries are not interested. What steps would you tell an artist to do in terms of making their own shows? I know things you've done already in the past, so if you could elaborate more on that. Have you done these universities or just markets or any, if you could elaborate on that a little. So
yeah,
let's say no one's interested in you or you're just starting. What's the steps we tell an artist to do? Where they don't, basically in situations where the artist doesn't need validation from anyone else besides himself. What were your first steps you took when you were painting and selling?
If your art, I would say, when I make a piece of art, I know it's good if something in my heart and in my soul, I like it myself. It feels like it's expressing what's in my heart and soul. And so if it does something to me, it almost has like this like bolt of lightning that happens like it almost feels like an energetic bolt of lightning when I'm doing the right thing and I'm on the right path and when I find that it's finished. And then getting it out there. So make sure that it's really yours and it does something to you emotionally, because if it does something to you emotionally, then it'll touch someone else on that level. And as far as getting into galleries, basically what I learned from my fellow art students was where you just send out to 100 people or more or whatever. Now that there's social media, it's free. It used to not be that easy. And because we would mail things. And so now it's send out what's called the machine gun. And if one door opens, one bit of interest comes in, that's a really big deal. And accept group shows of any kind.
You say any publicity is great publicity. Would that be a correct statement? Or not?
Not necessarily. Publicity is good, but make sure it's a gallery that you enjoy their work, that you have respect for the work that they're showing. College galleries are a good way to start too, university galleries, experimental galleries, nonprofit galleries. But in general, any exposure is good.
Also, one thing I see that you have is I see a lot of originality in your style and your ideas. A lot of artists call and say, "Oh, what should we make? Like, what should we make to get into your gallery?" I said, "I don't know." We try to push the artists to do what they connect to, and really that's what usually comes the most interesting and quality. Because as a gallery, you also want to be unique and different and special. And if you start telling artists what to do, we lose all that originality. So we usually do not direct. Unofficially, we don't direct artists what to make. We say, this works good, Maybe if they're already making a certain style, we'll say, by the way, these verses or this ideas do well. But really, we want the artist to do whatever connects it in. Like, so the bolt and lightning is very true. Because, Okay, thank you very much, Cynthia. You can check her out, work on our website, Instagram, and Google her to see many more of her great work. Thanks so much.
And thank you, Mom. And last but not least, I want to say thank you to Kyle, my husband, who constant and true, who without I would not be able to accomplish any of my artistic work. Thank you.